No mai haere atu aku mihi tuarangi ki a koutou katoa e ngaiwi. Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this very special presentation indeed tonight with three superlative experts of Te Ao Māori, of Aotearoa, of sailing, of navigation, of stargazing, of wayfinding leadership, not just in Aotearoa, but across the world. My name is Julian Wilcox, and on behalf of Te Toki Voyaging Trust and Live Ocean, it is great to have you with us here tonight. And boy, oh boy, my brain is blown by the expertise on our panel here tonight. So before we introduce them, it is my privilege to hand over to our matua, our papa, Rereata Makiha, to begin our kōrero with a karakia e te papa e te matua tēnā koe.
Kia ora mai rā tātou. He tapu ai manea te ika I karangatia te taio hokianga. E kui mai karama patu e te tere I uta, te tere I tai kei ketua e te kore. Tēnā hoki rātou hakatina, he kore pēng te ngongo kino, tane kino, kui kino. Ko rimu haere kauai, ko tōtara haere kauai, ko rimu haere kauai, ko pukate haere kauai, ko koroi haere kauai, titi e tata e. Kare kau ana te kare aroto nei e. Whakatau ana ke te toa I tā maua, whiti raua, haere mai te toki, haumi e, hui e,
tai ki e. E te matua tēnā koe I tāu karakia, e tika ke ake pēr mā Hoturoa au karakia, au kupu kōrero, tāu kupu karakia whakatātaki ake I tā tātou hui, e whakarehu ki te kupu, ki te kōrero, ki te mihi. Nā reira, e te tohunga e kara Hoturoa tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Julian. I te matua tēnā koe, nāu anō I whakatakoto I tēnei huarahi mā tātou I tēnei ai. Kia whakawhaiti nei I te wahanga I Wainganui a rangi nui rau ko papatū aku e tui nei a tātou. Me ki e rā kupu nāu anō I hora ki mua nei a tātou. Mō reira, e mihi ana. Huri noa ki a koutou ngā kai whakarongo e noho mai rā ki o koutou kāinga, ki o koutou wāhi noho ki ngā pito o te ao, tēnā koutou. I runga anō I te āhuatanga o aitua e haerere nei Wainganui a tātou I ngā wā katoa. Hoi anō ko rātou mā tērā te hunga wairua, te hunga mate kia rātou. Oki mai rā I te wāhi ngaro o ngā mātua o ngā tūpuna. Oki noa mai nei kia tātou te hunga ora I tēnei ahi e mihi kauake nei kia koutou. I runga I ngā āhuatanga o ngā kōrero o te pōnei. I runga I ngā āhuatanga o ngā koutou kaha tautoko I te mai kohi pūtea te toki I roto I nei rangi. Mihiana kia koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia kōrero hoki ngā māngai kōrero o te ahi nei. Tēnā kōrero taino atu kia koe anō e Hot Julian. Ko koe tēnā e whakahaere nei a matau tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora mai rā, Hoturoa. Thank you very much for those words of welcome. And again, thank you to Matua Rereata for our incantation tonight. And for those of you watching tonight, and already it's up to about 200 of you, so thank you for joining in. It's great to have you with us here tonight and to hear from these, as I say, experts, not just within Aotearoa, but across the world. So let's introduce them now. To begin with, of course, we know him from sailing, not just in Aotearoa, the America's Cup, also in the Olympics, also Sail GP, Blair Tuke. Joining us live, I believe, from Te Kirikiri in the heart of Ngāhi land. Blair, welcome and kia ora.
Kia ora, good evening. Great to be here this evening. Yep, that's right, from Kirikiri in the far north. Nice to be at home for a while after a pretty whirlwind year all over the globe. And yeah, real honour to be on tonight with Rereata and with Hoturoa. So yeah, looking forward to the chat. It should be great.
Thank you, Blair. Let's introduce now our matua, Rereata Makiha. I think coming to us from Kaikohe, not far from Kirikiri matua.
Nai, tika, tēnā tātou, ai Rereata Makiha kei Kaikohe I tēnei wā, in the middle of the Peru Gardens. So kei konei tonu au I tēnei wā, no e mihi ko ke nara kia tātou katoa, ko hui mai te pōnei.
Tēnā koe matua Rereata, and also joining us after a bit of a sojourn overseas, Dubai, I believe, now an MIQ in Tāmaki Makaurau at the Pullman. Hoturoa Barclay-Kerr, Hoturoa tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Julian. Yeah, here I am up in my room here at MIQ. It was a very good time overseas. I was overseas with some of the leaders of our iwi that were involved in a trade delegation to the World Expo in Dubai at an event called Te Ara Tini, which I guess symbolized the kind of hub that Dubai is, where trade and commerce and everything comes and centralizes around there. And we were led by Ngahiwi Tomwana, who organised for a conference to be held there where Indigenous people from around the world came to talk about their experiences and to look at what kind of opportunities there are out there for us in the wider world, especially in this time of COVID and all of those things. So our whole team is all parked up here at the Pullman in Auckland, and I have to say that people are looking after us, because not only are we getting fed by the hotel really well, but every day we get parcels of groceries and things popping up at our door that is set up. So big mihi all of fun out there that's been worried about us and thinking we're fading away. I can promise you we're not.
Ka wai, Hoturoa, and thank you. So let's talk about why we're here tonight. Now, people would have tuned in via the connection that's on the Toki Voyaging Trust page, or indeed potentially through Live Ocean. And Hoturoa, you've brought together, as I say, this expert panel, including your good self, to talk about issues that are relevant not just to the profession that Blair's involved in, or indeed the work that Rereata Makiha does, or your work as well, but pertain to all of us, not just in Aotearoa, not just Māori Pākehā, but across the world as well. And if I can get you to start by talking about a little navigational journey you undertook yourself in Dubai, which was led by stargazing in the desert, which just goes to show that stargazing doesn't just lead navigation on the sea, it also leads navigation on the land. Can you talk about that for us for a little moment, please?
Yes, sure, Julian. It was one of the things that I've always wanted to encounter was experience was to be able to be in the desert and talk to people who have navigated camel caravans across the desert. I've always thought that the shapes of sand dunes, the ripples, the way ripples appear on the top of those sand dunes, and the ways that they've moved around the place must have been pretty close to what it was like for us traveling across the ocean. I guess the only difference is that when you're going across the desert, you don't drown. You know, other than that, I think everything else is pretty much the same, because your resources are limited, and you have to rely on everything that's around you to get you to where you need to get. And so I was fortunate to meet up with a kaumātua over there, Dr. Hassan, who's an astronomer. And we met on Zoom first, but then we met in person out in the desert. And we spent quite a long time discussing astronomy, talking about the similarities between the way they did things and the way that we do things as we're navigating across the ocean. And he was really, really excited to see all the things that are similar, to see the different kinds of stars that we use are similar to the stars that they use. And although he doesn't navigate caravans anymore, his grandfather and great-grandfather, that was their mahi, was to move trade goods backwards and forwards to different parts of their region by camel. So being able to sit and talk with him and to understand things. One of the things that really excited him was the fact that he told me a story of this great seafaring ancestor of theirs about 400 or 500 years ago. And up until that time, they used to do a lot of trading of pearls and all those kind of things, all the way to Sri Lanka and back. But they would just sail along the coastline and eventually get there. Then this ancestor of his said, "Oh, I reckon it'd be faster if we just try and sail straight to Sri Lanka." Everybody was all scared and said, "Oh, it's dangerous and you won't see land and we could die in a storm," and all of those kind of things. But I stopped him there and I said, "I bet he looked at the North Star and then he figured out how high the North Star would be in Sri Lanka and how high it's be when he's from Muscat, and then keep that distance above the horizon as he travels to Sri Lanka. He should be all good. And Dr. Hassan was most astounded because he said, that's exactly what they did. So, without sort of really talking a lot about it, him telling that story, and I was able to immediately apply some of the knowledge that we have.
Wow.
And understood it. And so those are the kinds of things that we had a great time talking about. And that's why I think there should become a time where Blair and Rereata should meet up with them too, because to talk about he started talking about using the moon and lunar calendars and all those kind of things as well in their mahi and kaupapa in the desert. So I think there's room there for further conversation and for further research and for further connection.
Thank you. That's a fascinating kōrero, and thank you so much for presenting it to us tonight. Blair Tuke, I wonder why and how the expertise of people like Rereata Makiha and Hoturoa Barclay, how could it be applicable to the work that you do, being one of the master salesmen throughout the world, and the competitions that you do at the speed at which you do it with your partner Pete Burling, and particularly in the work that you do with Live Ocean. So when Rereata Makiha talks about being the Peru Garden and Kaikohe, and Hoturoa talks about what he's been doing, how does it align with the work that you do?
Well, it absolutely aligns, because we're, I guess, heading towards the same place. So for those tuning in that don't know maybe the mahi Julian's talking about, my sailing partner Pete and I founded a marine conservation charity 2 years ago, Live Ocean, which is basically an entity which looks to amplify and accelerate positive marine action in New Zealand, sort of getting behind science projects, outreach. So, and then, I guess how we connected with Hoturoa was about 8 months ago, or just after the America's Cup, actually. So through that work with Live Ocean, where we have a goal for a healthy ocean. We want an ocean that's full of life, that we can enjoy, we can spend time, and that feeds us, that sustains us. We want all of these things. And the work that Hotu and Toki is doing through the Voyaging Trust, they're coming at it from a different angle, but they want exactly the same thing for future generations. So it was a pretty natural fit. And as that relationship's developed over the last 8 months, it's grown, and we've continued to learn from each other. And I guess for Pete and I, we've really enjoyed learning a lot around how those first voyages came to Aotearoa. From a sailing side of it, it's been pretty incredible, to be honest, that just the skills, traveling all the way here, just using the stars, as Hotu was just talking about, the stars, and looking at the currents and the waves, and just how in tune those people were with the environment around them. And that's, I think, been lost over the years. And the work that they're doing now to try and reconnect that for younger generations is awesome, and it's really aligned to what we're doing. So it's great.
Thank you, Blair. I have to tell you, I was interviewed by a relation from Hokianga on Māori radio this morning who called you e haraia Blair Tuke or Blair Tuke. He's the tumatauenga of the seas. Blair Tuke, he said. Anyway, that's a bit of Ngāpuhi humour for you. I'll talk to you about it after. Speaking of Ngāpuhi humour, matua Rereata, the collaboration with these two gentlemen here, but also the work that you are doing. How does your work, particularly around maramataka, tiaki taiao, kōrero mō kupe, and your wānanga that you're establishing, taimoto kupe, how does it help you and what you are doing? And also, are you looking to also help in other ways with the work that Blair through Live Oceans is doing, and also with the Toki Voyaging Trust?
Oh, kia ora mai tātou. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting some of our young people to come and meet up with Blair and the Live Oceans team, because we have a group of young people who have been following the spawning patterns of the takeke and using the maramataka, and they got it so finely tuned they can actually tell you which tide those eggs are going to come in on. They're absolutely brilliant. they are now lined up with a university, or not a university, an organization in Wellington, where they're collecting the eggs and that are washing ashore, and then they are DNA sequencing them so they can tell you what those eggs are. And then they're also collecting samples of the water around where those eggs are coming ashore. And these guys doing the DNA testing can actually tell them what the companion species are for that particular fish, which is going to be absolutely brilliant in the restoration work that we are looking at doing. And these are the people out in the ocean. So we call those the turu atai. So that's the rōpū. They're from the sea, they whakapapa to the sea. They virtually live in the sea. So that's their job. They're looking around, finding ways to bring our ancestral knowledge to bear and to help the survival of our fish species and also the families. On the other hand, there's another rōpū which I'm looking after further inland called the turu auta. And so our work comes from we believe that the oceans start at the top of the mountains, and they come down through all our awa and freshwater creeks out through the repo, and finally into the place called the kurutai, which is where the freshwater meets the saltwater. And it's from there that the sea people, or the saltwater people, I call them, that's the sea people, where they take over these inquiries. And so our people who are looking after the streams and the restoration of the ngahere and the swamplands and all that work that we're having a look at doing, and looking after the kewai and bringing all those freshwater species back into our awa and getting our kura kids involved. There's kura right out through Northland here that are learning about the knowledge that was left behind by our old people. And it's interesting that even with Hoturoa and them in their waka sailing, even though we use the same stars, the stars that we learn and we teach our young people, we actually use to set the clock, if it were, as a clock. So you get, for example, the rehua. What's that in Pākehā?
Antares.
And Antares rises in the face of the sun. It triggers the peak flowering of what the old people call the matiti mura phase of summer, which is the third phase of summer. It triggers the flowering of the bright flowering of the pohutukawa tree and the rata tree. And at that same time, there are certain fish species that also come ashore and spawn at that time. So we're starting to track those sorts of things. And it's absolutely brilliant timing by using the same star rehua in June when it sets in the west, at the time that puanga rises in the east. That's when we set our new year, shut down the old year and get ready to bring in the new year. And we bring the new year in when rehua again sets in the west at the same time as takurua rises in the takurua. What's that? I don't know what that is. Anyway, it's that winter star. The takurua rises in the east, and it's exactly the high tide on the east coast up here. So that's how those stars were used by the old people in understanding the environment. So in understanding environments, and what we teach to our kura kids and the young ones who want to learn, is that you use the stars to begin your alignment, and then you have tohu, that's tohu o te rangi. Your tohu o te whenua are the trees, like the puhutukawa tree, for example. And then you have your tohu o te moana, which is in this particular case, the takeke on the Oturu moon. And so if you start to triangulate those kinds of things, you start to understand the environment a heck of a lot more than trying to study it in a book. So we actually take them out to actually observe these things and to see these fish coming in and getting tuned into the environment that's around them, but basing it on the ancestral kōrero o tuku iho.
Lawe, matua, a living classroom.
Yeah.
Working in a living classroom. Sirius, ne? Tagura?
Sirius. Sorry about that.
No, bayana. Wonderful, Matua, thank you very much. Hey, can I just get a very quick comment from you before I pass back to Hoturoa? How important is it to hear the likes of Blair Tuke talking about the affiliation, the alignment of what you're doing with the work that they're doing, given obviously the profile they have in world sailing, to have someone like him and Pete Burling obviously aligning their mahi to what you're talking about now, someone who has held this knowledge the many generations might anō through your ancestors down to you today.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and as you say, because of their, they're well known throughout the world, but also our young people will be amazed to actually come along and learn, because they see them as te tika te kōrero te korokena there, that he's the tūmatauenga of the sea. And that's how they see them, eh? Because they look at Hoturoa, that's the same thing, they're waka sailing people, eh? And they call them the kupe, ngā kupe o te niwana. And that's how the young people hold them in that sort of high regard, eh? And it encourages them to learn, but also to hold on to their tupuna ancestral knowledge, eh?
Blair, if I can come back to you, if that's okay, and then I'll come to Hotu. And I've just had people are commenting a lot, actually. So we're up to 300 people now commenting a lot on the links. And you're hearing the likes of Matua Rereata doing what he's doing at the moment, and that will have an impact on you. And I wonder how you might be able, can you see a way in which you might be able to implement this in a lot of what you're doing with Live Oceans now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at the charity at Live Ocean, we're an organisation that collaborates a lot. So we don't actually sort of do projects ourselves. We sort of collaborate with other organisations that are doing great work, and that's where the sort of relationships started with Toki, because of the work they're doing with young people connected, or to sailing, but then through that sailing and learning about waka and all of that, they're connected to the issues around ocean health. So there's many different ways you can connect to people, and I think connecting to people is the key thing, because when it comes to the ocean, the big thing with the ocean is that a lot of it's out of sight. So a lot of the issues that the ocean's facing is happening below the surface, and unless you can get people to care and take their eyes below and their hearts below the ocean surface, then you're not going to get real change. So coming at it from a lot of different angles and collaborating with different organizations and different groups is absolutely important, and what we're really trying to do.
Thank you, Blair. And I've just had I'm trying to manage the comments and questions as they're coming in, as well as, and probably failing miserably. There's a comment coming about how do you measure the impact of the work that you're doing, Blair, with Live Oceans?
Yeah, well, it's really tricky to do. We're a pretty young organisation, only 2 years old, but it's been a good 2 years. We've got behind some really good projects. The first project we got behind was the tracking of the Antipodean albatross, so the Totoa, which was a great project to get behind for us. For Pete and I, it was one we were really connected to from our sailing through the Southern Ocean and the ocean race. And then we got the project put back in front of us when we started Live Ocean, because the birds were dying at an alarming rate, and basically the Live Ocean supported the tracking, so devices to go on the birds to see where they're going, to see where they were coming into trouble with the fishing fleets. So then you can start from the other side to see or try and make change to how those fishing boats are fishing with, and using different mitigation techniques, etc., to try and reduce the rate which the birds are dying. So, and we've seen some good gains there. We've seen some collaboration between the New Zealand and Spanish governments sort of committing to trying to do those sort of 3 mitigation techniques. So that's a real win. And yeah, I guess you just have to use science where you can, and I think we are starting to see changes, but it's going to take time. It's going to take people to come around these issues, because issues are big and coming at us pretty fast, but we've got to come around them all together.
Kia ora, Blair. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Hoturoa, if I can come back to you now, you have said over a number of years now that waka is the symbol of mana. So how does Te Toki Voyaging Trust make that symbol of mana through waka? How do you make that real in people's lives?
I think for us, it's actually getting the waka to places and allowing people to experience it. I think, one of the things that people watch us do, they think, oh, that's good. They should go sailing to Hawaii and might sail to Rarotonga and sail to Tahiti and things like that, which we've done. But I have to say that some of the most rewarding experiences we actually put time into sailing our waka around the motu, around Aotearoa, taking it to small communities, running science programs with the kids, doing things with the local kaumātua. And then what happens is, and when we look at it in a sort of mana enhancing way, this is the time when people start popping up with all their kōrero. Often you'll have people who, for one reason or another, don't really like to talk about their ancestors sailing across Hiana Waka, because for a lot of the time, we've always been encouraged to believe that the arrival of our tupuna was just pretty much a stroke of luck, So often when you sit down with people and they say, oh, when they start talking about the ancestors arriving on canoes, for a long time, it's been one of those stories that people try hard not to talk about because it's devalued in terms of what people believe. But our ability to sail a waka somewhere and to land on a beach, I've seen it, where we land on a beach and then kaumātua will come and talk to us, we'll put them on the waka. And then, when we tell them we've been to Rereata, we've landed on the beach that Ngā Tōroirangi walked on, like those kinds of kōrero. Suddenly it drags these ancient stories out of this little box that they've kept hidden for their whole lifetime, and suddenly start talking about all the stories that they've heard when they were talking. And then suddenly you start to see a pride that comes into their voice as they talk about, my kuia told me this story about when our first people arrived on this land. And sometimes they're stories that have never really been spoken about. And what happens is that people start to believe that being who they are is actually a good thing. Being a descendant of these people is a good thing. It's not something you should hide, but something you should celebrate and talk about. And those are the kind of mana enhancing kaupapa that the waka can help us to drive along. It's actually not about the mana that a waka has for itself, but it's the mana that it can bring to the people that engage with it. And, being able to encourage kaumātua to talk about stories they remembered when they were, you might be talking about 70 or 80-year-old people talking about stories that they heard when they were 6 or 7 years old. And these are treasures for the people who are sitting there listening to them. And then on the other hand, if we have all our rangatahi then they're listening to these stories, suddenly these stories that were on the brink of extinction come back to life again. And the names of all these tupuna come back to life again because we speak them into existence again. And the waka is that powerful tool that allows us to be able to do all these things, allows us to recreate space so that kaupapa like rereatas can be driven, that focuses attention around those kind of things, the ability to work with schools and teachers and scientists to look at all of the things that are important to us, especially with taking care of our waterways, taking care of our harbours, taking care of our coastline, taking care of our ocean. Where do we find knowledge? Where do we find solutions in the kōrero that some of these people might share with us? And then how do we align that with some of the modern day responses and solutions that might be around today? So those are the kind of things that I think when we talk about waka as a symbol of mana, it brings all of those things to the fore. Who you are, where you came from, you might want to be in a good way.
We've got a number of questions coming in. One about skincare from Billy Joe Hoturoa Barclay-Kerr. That's Uncle Rowley's niece, so we don't need to post that. I'll answer her directly. Funnily enough, she's asking you about it, Hoturoa, not me or Blair, which is interesting. Anyway, I'm a bit offended by that. So keep the questions coming in if you can. We've got a little while to go in our kōrero. Hoturoa, you mentioned something earlier which really struck me. And by the way, I think this is great. We should take this show on the road, actually. This is awesome. But anyway, Blair's too busy, though. But Blair's too busy though, and you've been at Dubai, so it'll only be me and Uncle Rowley who are available. But you said something interesting. You said, you know, what we do, i.e. Te Toki Voyaging Trust, and what our tupuna have been doing for years is the same as what Blair has been doing. They just do it faster.
That's right.
Can you talk to me a bit more about that?
Well, you know, I love, even though it's the middle of the night, sometimes I love watching them racing. You know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll send them a text and go, you guys better do better on your start this time and stuff like that. But really what it is whenever I watch them racing on those catamarans that can go, you know, 40 kilometers an hour, 50 kilometers an hour, 70 kilometers an hour, I just feel proud because these are like the great grandchildren of the waka that our tupuna sailed on, you know, and I'm not surprised because in really good weather, when we've sailed our waka in a number of different places, we've got a waka that, you know, weighs about 12 tons, 13 tons fully loaded, and we can get it going at 25 knots. That people can't believe us when we're doing that. So I have no problem looking at them on these high end waka doing those kinds of speeds because I think it's fantastic. And I also think that you know, it helps to reinforce stories of some of our tupuna who that, you know, they've been some tupuna who've made trips to Aotearoa in, you know, less than a week. And I know that there's these waka up in the islands that can easily do 20 knots for sustained periods of time. And so to watch them doing that on their waka today and to see people from around the world crewing and racing these kinds of things with all the technology that comes with it, I think it's great because it shows whakapapa, but it also shows the kind of things that people have thought about, even in terms of sail design and things like that. Back in, you know, when some of the first European explorers came through the Pacific and they did drawings of some of the waka that they saw in places like Tahiti and French Polynesia, excuse me, you know, they had these high aspect sails, and they really only started come into use in the last 30 or 40 years in some of this racing, which are these really tall sails, and they're almost rectangular in shape. And it's gone on another step where they've been made into wings now. And you have guys like the Bear who know how to sort of move the sail and the mast around to get the perfect aerodynamics and stuff like that. And all these things. And when you see this waka cruise along, then suddenly just 11 tons lifts out of the water on that one little thing. It's awesome, you know. And all I ever do when I was out, I was going, man, if my ancestors were alive and could see this, they'd just think that was the best thing out, you know. And I think these are the things that make it really good for us to be able to see. And also, and because we're not looking at this from afar, because we have a good relationship with these guys, you know. For when I was interested in some of this stuff, you know, Blair was taking me around, showing me all the stuff that they have to be able to do to make the waka or make the waka race at, you know, to maximum potential, which is really at the end of the day what we want when we're sailing. We're around safety, but we also want to get our waka moving at maximum potential to get us to where we want to go to quickly. And yeah, those are the kind of things that link us together, and it's great. I just love it.
Beautiful kōrero Hoturoa. Thank you very much. Blair, when you hear that, you know, not just the excitement that obviously Hotu's just, you know, explained and shown and displayed there in terms of what you do at the speeds that you do it, but there is such a similarity between the way that you're or what you are doing in terms of sailing and the linkage back to these generations upon generations of navigational history. I mean, how does that affect you? What impact does that have on you in the mahi that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear from Hotu then and the learning that we've done over the last 8 months or so. But yeah, I guess we've always been proud to be from Aotearoa, to be able to race offshore and race for our country around the world. And being from a country with such a proud history of sailing, of voyaging, and to be honest, that's been a new learning for me. Just some of those things that Hotu was talking about before has been new, and I don't think enough people from Aotearoa understand, where those first voyages came from and just how skilled they were and how brave they were to take on those passages. But yeah, using the stars to travel down from the Pacific Islands, going at pretty amazing speeds, how, like I talked about before, how in tune with the environment they were. It's been amazing for Pete and I to be on that journey of learning. So the learning's definitely going both ways. But yeah, it's just reinforced, what a great country we come from a sailing and voyaging point of view. And I guess for all people in Aotearoa, when we've got such an amazing ocean space, I guess.
I'll tell you what, I've caused a bit of a stir here on the comments about the "let's take this on the road" comment. Everyone's up liking it. One of my aunties even saying, make sure you bring Blair, I'll be there. And we talked about this being mutually beneficial, Blair. So what are the benefits for you in terms of all the mahi that you're doing, but particularly sailing? Because that's where, I guess, for want of a better pun, the rubber hits the road, and a lot of what you do with Pete on the ocean. What are the benefits of knowing, understanding, having time, having space to be able to talk with people like Hotu and potentially Matua Rereata about this fine Māori navigational history? What benefit of it for you in terms of the racing that you do, like Sail GP, America's Cup, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think to start with, that we're only at the beginning of that journey. We had a good catch up with John actually the other day, Hotu from Te Toki, and he was taking us through some basic things. But yeah, we're going to continue that, and I think it's important for us to do it to help when we're there, sort of racing around the world. We're doing it now with Live Ocean on the wing of that sail that Hotu was talking about before. We're doing it with the Blue Fern on the sail, which is the as a New Zealand sports person, that's always great to race with the fern there, but it's in the shade of blue for that connection through to the ocean that we race for. So yeah, if we can now have this other sort of side to it where we've taken that knowledge of the people that have gone before us, and it's been so great that Hotu's and Te Toki have sort of taken us on board and sort of given us that connection. But some people there might not know, but the name of our F50 that we race on in Sail GP is Amakura, which is pretty amazing to have that gifted to us from Te Toki. So yeah, I think it's really important for us, and we see that as a responsibility to connect more people to the sort of first voyages and the connections through to the ocean.
Bye. Thank you, Blair. Matua Rereata, you made a comment earlier that's really resonated with a lot of people in the comments that we're seeing coming through. That is that these two gentlemen, you were talking about Blair and Hotu, people see them as kupe. And I think sometimes people fail to distinguish the fact that kupe, yes, he tupuna or ngā tupuna kupe, but also as a kaupapa. What for you is that kupe kaupapa? Can you explain that to us?
It's basically trying to capture or to recapture all the stories around all our voyaging waka, and teaching the next generations about how brilliant those ancestors were. I mean, the work that Hoturoa and them are doing with our young people and visiting the different communities around the motu. Be brilliant, if some good people came along and we were able to do that, run lots of those voyages around and taking these our ancestors' knowledge, brilliant knowledge to all our tamariki growing up in all our kura, not just the kura kaupapa, but and through all our schools, because we have there's a big challenge ahead, because we have over 800 names of the different types of winds that our ancestors knew. And our challenge is actually trying to put them into family of winds, because that's how they taught those winds. So we have the family of winds called the lazy winds, or ngā hau mangere, where mangere gets its name from, the family of lazy winds. And those are all those winds that can't move a waka. So those are the days when the racing gets cancelled, I think, Blair. So next time he comes through, you can say, oh, those bloomin' hauruhi, haungenge, those haumangere are here. But they had this idea that there were families of winds that could do different things, and all described in all these over 800 names. And I think that if we could get them into these families of winds and teach them through our kura, it's going to just be brilliant in helping to understand our environment.
And Matua, can I just ask a question? This type of knowledge, there's been a comment raised by someone here who's talking about research done by Dr. Nalani Wilson Hokovetu, Rereata Wahine, and their place in Polynesian navigation traditions. And it raises a really important question around how accessible is this knowledge to rangatahi and to wahine? Who is this knowledge for? Is it for everyone, or is it knowledge that can be transferred to everyone? Should be learned by everyone?
Yeah, I'm always of the opinion that any knowledge that's been handed down should be shared, especially to our tamariki, our mokopuna, our whānau, but it should be taught and shared because it's in understanding all these kōrero tuku ihoa that we get to understand better how our taiao works. And there's with the global shift towards climate change, we actually have ways of tracking when that climate changes. So in the muramura phase of summer, for example, which is the third phase of our summer, for those who don't know, the matiti kura, matiti hana, and the matiti muramura phase, which we're coming into on the 5th of December at 5:30 in the morning. Well, you're allowed to have technology. We got technology and you can cheat these days. You can predict something ahead. But that's when we shift to the muramura phase. And that muramura phase is triggered by the rise of rehua in the face of the sun and the flowering of the pohutukawa and the northern rata. But a few years ago, that whole muramura phase shifted 7 weeks. It's usually around early December. And about 4 years ago, it shifted 7 weeks. And we were able to track it because unless you can triangulate tohu o te rangi, the stars and tohu o te whenua, these trees, and the tohu o te moana, that moana activity is not going to happen until all those other markers are in sync. And so the muramura phase shifted 7 weeks. And then when it shifted, we were able to track it and follow it. And the takeke came in on the button. And I always ask scientists that it's only because when I get stuck and I didn't do too well at science, and then I can ask the scientists, how would that fish have known that the muramura phase had shifted 7 weeks and that it came in right on the button, where all the signs, the currents, the winds, everything was on time, and then in come those eggs again. They come off, so absolutely brilliant. It's back on track again into early December. So that's when we talk about climate change. Our tupuna knowledge actually helps us to track the changes in the climate before it happens.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Hala mai, Mata. Hala mai. Look, we're slowly coming to the end. I haven't been given the specific wrap-up phase. I have been encouraged to mute myself and get rid of my video and just let the three of you go, which I'm happy to do. It's called a sacrifice. I'll be happy to do it. But I think we are coming to a bit of a close now, although the numbers are going through the roof. So we've got one question that's come in about it's about sail configurations from Hoki Mai Chong. So I better ask it. I know Hoki Mai and his whānau. So at the risk of not being invited for dinner one day, I better pose it to both you and you, Blair, and Hoturoa. It says, can you talk to us about different sail configurations on the AC75s and Waka Hodua? It's great kōrero. Would love to hear an answer or any kōrero about that. Do you mind if I pose that? I'll start with you, Blair, and then come to you, Hoturoa.
Yeah, sure. Well, on the AC75, we're back to using soft sails again, although in the sail GP, we use wing sails, which is basically a really lightweight frame, almost like an airplane wing, but a lightweight frame. It has a sort of really thin cover over it, and then you can adjust that sort of through different hydraulic rams, etc., to change the shape of the sail all the way up. On the AC75, it was back to soft sails. When I say soft sails, that's more similar to what they use on the Waka Hoturoa, but the sails in the AC75, because they've got so much load through them, they have quite a lot of carbon fiber sort of structure through them, so they're a little bit different, and the speeds, like Hotu was talking about before, you're starting to go pretty fast, so a lot of the difference actually between what happens on the Waka Hoturoa and the fast boats we sail now is that the wind's pretty much in front of us wherever we're going, and on those fast boats. But that's another story, talking about it apparently when that gets complicated. We'll be here all night.
To be honest, I don't think people mind that much because the numbers are climbing. Hoturoa, can I get an answer from you just to that question from Hoki Mai?
Yeah, we actually take a couple of different sets of sails on our waka, and actually that's at the moment is our little fundraising gig is to get another set of sails actually, but the whole thing for us is not so much winning the race, but getting there. So sometimes you'll see on the sails that Blair and them are using, they've got heaps of square meterage, and so they get heaps of drive out of it, and then they drive it to the absolute edge. So where they're gonna flip over sometimes. And so for us, our whole gig is around not flipping over, but getting there safely. So we probably don't carry as much sail as they would, because what we're after is just good solid drive. We'll put up quite a lot of sail if the winds are quite light and we need to just get a little, some of those little hau mangere that Rereata was talking about. So to try and catch as much as we can, we'll throw up as many sails as we can, but we also have to be ready as the wind picks up, we start dropping all of those things too. But at the moment, we just sail with sails that are made from modern day materials, like canvas and stuff like that. But we do have a set of traditional sails that are woven, but we only use them on sort of special occasions and things like that. We'll whip them out because they're like big tonga for us, and so we try our best to we keep them in our whare nui at home, and then every now and then we'll pull them out and take them out and use them at a big event. But other than that, we stick to using sails made of modern day materials. And like I said, we don't have the ability to twist the sail mast and all those kind of things around. If something happens, we have to climb up to the top of the mast. I think that me and them probably have to do the same stuff. Whenever there's any issues like that, you need to find a brave person that you can send up to way up into the highest parts of the waka to fix things up, or hang out off the front of the waka to fix things up. And they'll probably have to do that too. So there's all those things that are similar. But I think the technology of racing today and a technology around knowing how those wings operate and how to adjust them to get maximum speed is a real big difference between how we're sailing and what they're doing on things like SailGP.
I'm always amazed by those people who go up the sails at that height. I think their names they're called Maya, aren't they? Or Wete Kore or something like that. Okay, look, a couple of last questions, if I may. We've got a really interesting question here, Hoturoa, about initiation into navigator status and whether or not there are differences in terms of the protocols or for that process between Aotearoa, Hawaii.
Yeah, actually, we've been having a few talks about that recently. Me, Stan, Jacko, who three of us have been doing it for quite a long time now. But it's trying to establish what a navigational, test might look like. We used the run from Marquesas to Hawaii to test a couple of navigators in the past. And we're just looking at what that might look like around here, rather than having to sail to Marquesas and sail to Hawaii. What's a good distance here in Aotearoa for navigators to sail a waka, get there, then bring the waka home. And at the end of the day, the ultimate test is for them, there's no A, B, C, or D pass mark for this kind of mahi. It's like, oh, you got there, good, everyone's alive. And if the waka doesn't get there and you never see it again, that's a fail.
Yeah, that'll do it, I think. That'll do it. Okay, look, we are going to wrap up now, and apologies for many others. It's really interesting, actually. If you get the chance, panel members, have a look at the comments. There's some hard case ones here. Blair, one from Sharon Hawke, Ngāti Whātua, the Ngāti Whātua whānau that you would have done a bit of work with America's Cup. She says, who's the young fella? Oh, it's you, Mr. Blair. And then she says, the panel's awesome. Julian, you're okay. Thank you, Sharon. Love you. So the last question I was going to ask, and I'll go around, is we hear a lot of similarities in the quarter that you're all giving, which I think underpins why you are all actually, in many various forms and ways, kupe manifest. But I wanted to ask around principles, not so much valuables, but principles that guide you in your mahi, and I'm assuming there might be a lot of similarities. But and there'll be many, but maybe the top three principles that come to mind in all the mahi that you're doing, and the key principles involved there. Can I start with you, Blair, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. I think I might have said it right at the beginning, but I guess our hopes that we can have an ocean that feeds us, that sustains us, and that's full of life. And with this group, I think in particular, we're hoping that sailing and voyaging can connect people to the issues that the ocean faces. Bring them around it, and try and sort of reverse the trends.
Thank you, Blair. Tēnā koe. Matua Rereata?
Yeah, te mea nui kia mātou, the important thing is that we try as much as we can, in fact, all the time, to hold to our ancestral kōrero tuku iho, that aligns that kōrero with the work and the actions that we take in the ngahere, in the waterways, out in the moana. And we allow the ancestral kōrero tuku iho to actually guide us in the work that we have to do, and so that we don't get distracted by other things, and that we hold as close as we can to what our ancestors have left us.
Tēnā koe, kara, Hoturoa.
Tupuna, ancestors. So if you were to ask me what are those three things, it would be that the desire to represent our tupuna from the past, our tupuna, so the tupu of the past, of the present, and the future. And if we represent all of those tupuna well, we're doing the right thing. And if we bring all the right things to our game, hopefully in 1,000 years, someone might find this kōrero in some archives somewhere and go, those guys were good tupuna. That would be awesome. If not, we'll be on the wrong track.
Tēnā koe tau katoa. Thank you all very much. Before we end, and again, this is part of a really important kaupapa for Te Toki Voyaging Trust, supported by Live Ocean. So this kaupapa also has to give a little campaign as well to raise funds for new stays and sails, and also to provide sailing experiences for rangatahi on Waka Haurua. Now, the rangatahi kōrero, there's a link actually that's gone out on the comments to this panel. You can see that from Te Toki Voyaging Trust, which talks about the work they're doing with rangatahi, and some information there for those of you who have rangatahi, or indeed are rangatahi, who are interested in the work that Te Toki Voyaging Trust is doing for rangatahi. That link is there as well. And our thanks also to Live Ocean for their support for Te Toki Voyaging Trust for this event. Can I thank our panel, our esteemed panel members here tonight, for giving their time and also for providing their expertise. For many people who have watched tonight, to Blair Tuke, Matua Rereata Makiha, and of course to Hoturoa Barclay. Tēnā koutou katoa ko rangatira e whakakupe mai nā koutou I a koutou mahi. Maroto tonu I ngā mahi waka, maroto tonu I a turuturu au, ta turuturu ātai. E harai te mea mō koutou, e harai te mea mō tātou e ngari mō ngā tamariki mokopuna me ngā haka tupuranga e pihi ake ana. Thank you all for the work that you are doing. not just for today, but also for the many generations to come. To Blair Tuke, Rereata Makiha, Hoturoa Barclay-Kerr, tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you. And to those of you who joined us here tonight on this panel discussion, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot out of the discussion tonight. I know I have, and I've been writing notes, copious amount of notes, as our panel members have been discussing and talking tonight. So thank you all very much. As I said, we propose the idea of taking this on the road. It might not happen, but maybe we can do an episode 2 at some stage. We'll let the Toki Voyaging Trust take care of that. Please stay safe and well, particularly as we deal with things like COVID-19. Ia tātou e tātātua na ki te kirihi me te, may the seas before you all be calm, may they glisten like greenstone, and may the shimmer of summer dance across your pathway now and forevermore. Kia ora mai rā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.